Aquarius, let me ask you something quietly. Have you noticed that nothing in your life is actually wrong, yet something inside you no longer feels right? You're still doing the same things, talking to the same people, living inside a life that looks stable from the outside, but somehow, it doesn't hold you the way it used to. This isn't a breakdown. This is subtler than that. It's the moment when your soul grows faster than the version of you that built this life. And the strange part is, no one else can see it yet. Only you can feel it. Pause. If this already feels familiar, type in the comments, I feel the shift. Because what's happening now isn't about losing anything. It's about realizing there's a part of you that simply can't come with you anymore. And once you see which part that is, everything starts to change. Aquarius, I want to sit with you for a moment, not to fix anything, not to analyze your life, just to notice what's already been happening inside you. Because the truth is, you didn't wake up one day and feel like everything collapsed. There was no dramatic moment, no phone call, no sudden loss. It was quieter than that. It was more like walking into a familiar room and realizing the air feels different. Nothing has moved, yet somehow, you don't quite belong in it the same way anymore. You're still capable, still responsible, still showing up. But there's a subtle distance now between who you are and the life you're living. Not painful, just hollow in places you never noticed before. And that's the strange part, isn't it? How something can look perfectly fine and still feel emotionally outdated. Like wearing a jacket that once kept you warm, but now feels too heavy for the season you're in. You don't hate it, you're just no longer inside it. The endings that shape us the most rarely arrive with closure. They arrive with silence, with a loss of resonance, with that soft moment when your heart stops reacting the way it used to. No grief, just a gentle fading of emotional connection. And what makes this so confusing is that nothing is technically wrong. There's no clear problem to solve, no obvious reason to leave, so you stay, you continue, you adjust. But deep down, you can feel it. You've outgrown something that once felt like home, not because it failed you, not because you failed it, but because growth is not loyal to the past. It moves forward without asking if you're ready to let go. And Aquarius, you are someone who notices these shifts early. You feel them before language forms around them. You sense the emotional climate changing long before the storm, or the sunlight becomes visible. That's why this feels unsettling. You're standing at the edge of a truth that hasn't fully revealed itself yet. All you know is the version of you who built this life no longer fits inside it. And that doesn't mean your life was wrong. It means it worked. It served you. It carried you to a place where your nervous system is finally calm enough to want more than survival. Here's the question I want to gently place in your hands. When was the last time your life truly surprised you? Not challenged you, not exhausted you, but actually felt new. Because often, the first sign of an ending is not loss, it's boredom. Not the lazy kind, the sacred kind. The kind that appears when your soul is ready for a larger story. And maybe that's what's happening now. Not a collapse, not a crisis. Just a quiet moment where your inner world is softly whispering, there is more to you than this chapter. You don't need to rush. You don't need to decide anything yet. Just notice where your heart no longer echoes back. Notice what feels emotionally finished, even if your mind hasn't caught up. Because once you become aware of that space, once you recognize that absence, you can never fully return to how it was before. And that's when the real question begins to rise. Not what are you losing, but who are you becoming now that the old version of you is slowly stepping aside? Aquarius, stay with me right here. Because after you notice that quiet emptiness, something else slowly reveals itself. It doesn't feel dramatic. It feels familiar, almost comforting. There are parts of your life you're still holding, not because they light you up, but because they once kept you safe. They were good to you when you needed stability, when you were rebuilding, when chaos felt louder than hope. And for a long time, that was enough. But here's the gentle truth I want to offer you. As a friend sitting beside you in the dark, comfort has a way of overstaying its welcome. At first it feels like relief. Then it becomes routine. And slowly, without asking permission, it turns into something heavier. Not pain, not suffering, just a quiet dulling of desire. You wake up, you move through your day, everything functions. Yet nothing reaches you deeply anymore. And because there's no obvious problem, you tell yourself to be grateful. You remind yourself how far you've come. You compare your life to versions that were harder. So, you stay. You stay in the job that doesn't challenge you, but pays the bills and respects your time. You stay in the connection that doesn't hurt, but no longer truly sees you. You stay in the routine that keeps you steady, but never lets your pulse quicken. This is the comfort trap. Not because comfort is bad, but because comfort, when clung to too long, becomes an invisible cage. And Aquarius, you are especially vulnerable to this because you are loyal to what once saved you. You don't forget who showed up when things were heavy. You don't abandon systems that worked. But evolution doesn't ask for loyalty. It asks for honesty. The same structure that protected you during one chapter can quietly block your growth in the next. That doesn't make you ungrateful. It makes you alive. Here's something most people don't realize until much later in life. Safety and fulfillment are not the same thing. Safety keeps you standing. Fulfillment makes you feel awake. And somewhere inside you, there's a part that's been gently knocking, not with urgency, but with persistence. A part that wonders what it would feel like to choose expansion over predictability. Let me ask you something softly. If nothing changed for the next 5 years, would you still recognize yourself in the mirror of that future? Not judge it, just feel it. Because the discomfort you've been sensing lately is not dissatisfaction. It's readiness. Your nervous system has learned how to survive. Now your soul wants to learn how to live. And that shift is subtle. It doesn't shout. It whispers through boredom, through restlessness, through moments where you feel strangely untouched by a life that once felt meaningful. This is not a call to burn everything down. It's an invitation to notice where comfort has quietly replaced curiosity, to see where your life has become too familiar to inspire you. And as you begin to see that clearly, another question starts forming just beneath the surface. What would it mean to choose growth even if it means letting go of what once felt safe? That question doesn't need an answer yet, but once it appears, it changes how you see everything. And from here, the path ahead begins to glow, just slightly brighter than the place you've been standing. Aquarius. There's another layer beneath that gentle restlessness. It doesn't arrive as sadness. It doesn't even feel heavy at first. It feels like quiet withdrawal. You start noticing how easily you get tired around people, not because they did anything wrong, not because you stopped caring, just because being present suddenly costs more energy than it used to. You reply slower. You cancel plans you once looked forward to. You choose silence over conversation, not out of anger, but out of an unspoken need to preserve something inside you. And you might not even have words for it yet. You just know that explaining yourself feels exhausting. Repeating your story feels pointless. Holding space for everyone else feels like a responsibility you can no longer afford emotionally. This is not a breakdown. It is not a crisis. It is emotional fatigue, the kind that comes when your inner world has quietly outgrown the environment around it. Your body notices first, through tension in your shoulders, through shallow breaths, through that subtle irritation you cannot quite justify. Your mind will catch up later, but your nervous system already knows. It knows that your soul has been negotiating with your life for too long, smiling when something felt misaligned, nodding when something no longer resonated, adjusting yourself to fit spaces that stopped evolving. And Aquarius, you are especially sensitive to this shift because you live ahead of your own timeline. You feel the future before it arrives. You sense change before it becomes logical. So, when your outer world lags behind your inner growth, your energy begins to leak, not in dramatic ways. In small withdrawals, less patience, less enthusiasm, less desire to explain yourself to people who no longer ask the right questions. And here is the part no one really teaches us. Fatigue is not always about doing too much. Sometimes it is about living in places that no longer nourish who you are becoming. You are not tired of life. You are tired of translating yourself into a version that feels smaller than your truth. There is a difference. Your spirit has been whispering through irritation, through detachment, through that strange urge to be alone, even when nothing is technically wrong. It is saying, I need a new emotional climate. Not escape, not destruction, just alignment. Let me ask you something gently. When was the last time you felt truly seen without having to explain yourself? Not understood intellectually, felt. Because exhaustion often comes from carrying a self that no longer belongs in the rooms you keep entering. And the deeper truth is this: you do not lose energy, you redirect it. When your soul stops agreeing with your life, it pulls your vitality inward. It conserves. It waits. Not because it is giving up, but because it is preparing for something more honest. This is why rest alone does not fix it. Vacations do not fix it. Distractions do not fix it. What you are craving is not recovery. It is resonance. A way of living that does not require emotional armor. A pace that does not dull your sensitivity. A presence that does not drain you just to maintain it. Your fatigue is not a weakness. It is intelligence. It is your inner compass recalibrating. Your body saying this version of reality is no longer sustainable. And once you begin to honor that signal, without rushing to label it, without forcing yourself to be grateful, something soft starts unfolding. Not urgency, not fear. Just a quiet knowing that you are standing at the edge of a deeper self. One that no longer wants to perform existence. One that wants to inhabit it. And as that awareness settles in, another gentle question begins to surface. What parts of your life are you emotionally outgrowing without consciously admitting it yet? You do not need to answer it today, but your soul already has. Aquarius. There is a kind of anger that does not shout. It does not slam doors. It does not raise its voice. It lives much deeper than that. It lives in the spaces where you chose peace when you needed truth. In the moments you said it is fine when something inside you quietly folded. You are skilled at staying calm, at reading the room, at smoothing tension before it becomes visible. Not because you are weak, but because you learned early that harmony keeps you safe. So, you learn to hold things in, to process alone, to be the one who understands everyone else while leaving yourself unheard. And over time, something subtle happens. Your emotions stop asking for permission. They start collecting interest. Every time you swallowed a reaction, every time you adapted instead of expressing, and every time you chose to be reasonable instead of real, the feeling did not disappear. It simply went underground. This is why your anger feels confusing. It does not come with a clear cause. It rises in small waves, irritation at simple questions, tension in conversations that should feel easy, a sudden need for distance even from people you love. It is not about them. It is about the parts of you that were never given space to exist fully. Anger is not the opposite of love. It is the guardian of your boundaries. It appears when your inner world has been compromised for too long, when you have been emotionally generous without being emotionally honest. Let me ask you something softly. If you spoke without filtering yourself today, who would be surprised, not offended? Surprised, because that is usually the sign. When people think they know you, but only know the version that keeps the peace, there is a self inside you that has opinions you never voiced, needs you never stated, limits you never enforced. Not because you lacked courage, but because you valued connection more than clarity. And now your body is speaking what your mouth never did, through tight jaws, through shallow breaths, through that restless feeling in your chest that no amount of calm seems to settle. This is not destruction. It is information. Your system is saying something important has been ignored. One of the most powerful things you can do right now is something no one will ever see. Write a letter you will never send. To the job that slowly shrank your spirit. To the relationship where you became easier instead of truer. To the version of yourself that believed silence was maturity. Do not make it polite. Do not make it spiritual. Make it honest. Say the things you edited. Admit the disappointments you minimized. Name the boundaries you never drew. Not to blame, not to accuse, but to witness your own truth without interruption for the first time in years. Because anger, when listened to, does not want to destroy your life. It wants to rebuild it on real ground. You do not need to become louder. You need to become clearer. There is a calm that comes from suppression, and there is a calm that comes from alignment. Only one of them lets you breathe fully. And the moment you stop abandoning your inner voice just to keep outer peace, something remarkable begins to happen. Your anger softens into strength. Your tension transforms into self-respect. Your silence turns into presence. Not dramatic, not sudden. Just a quiet shift in how much of yourself you are finally willing to occupy. And maybe the real question is not why you feel irritated lately. Maybe it is this. What truth has been waiting inside you so long that it is starting to ache to be spoken? Aquarius. There is a part of you that has never been fully introduced to the world. Not because it is broken, not because it is unworthy, but because it learned very early that being visible carries a certain risk. So you became careful with your light, selective with your truth, strategic with your dreams. You learned how to edit yourself, how to soften your edges, how to keep the most alive parts of you in quiet inner rooms where no one could judge them. From the outside, people see someone thoughtful, composed, interesting, but never too much. They do not see the ideas you never acted on, the opinions you rewrote before speaking, the version of you that only exists in your imagination and late-night thoughts. Not because you lack courage, but because you understand consequences. You understand that once you show your real mind, you cannot unshow it. Once you live your real truth, you cannot pretend again. So you postponed yourself. You waited for better timing, for more certainty, for a version of you that feels safe enough to finally be real. And slowly, without noticing, your inner world became richer than your outer life. Your thoughts travel further than your actions. Your feelings go deeper than your expressions. Your potential feels larger than your daily reality. This is not laziness, this is protection. You learn to survive by staying adaptable, by being the one who understands everyone, by not needing too much from anyone. But the cost of that skill is that you also learned how to disappear quietly. Self-doubt does not come from failing too many times. It comes from not letting yourself be seen at all, from rehearsing life instead of living it, from imagining futures you never test, from carrying a self that feels real inside but invisible outside. Let me ask you something gently. If no one could misunderstand you, what would you finally say out loud? Not what sounds acceptable, not what feels safe, what feels true. There is a hidden self inside you that is not asking for perfection. It is asking for permission. Permission to try without guarantees, to speak without over-explaining, to show up without first shrinking. You do not fear failure, you fear misinterpretation. You fear being seen clearly and not being received the way you hoped. So you choose invisibility over vulnerability, potential over exposure, imagination over risk. And yet, something inside you already knows. You cannot heal what you never reveal. You cannot trust what you never test. You cannot grow into a self you keep locked inside. The hidden self does not want applause. It wants air. It wants to breathe in real spaces, to be shaped by real experience, to be allowed to exist imperfectly. Not to be impressive, just to be present. And the paradox is this: the longer you wait to show who you are, the more unreal your life begins to feel. Not painful, just slightly distant. Like watching your own story through glass. You do not need to become someone new. You need to stop hiding someone real. And maybe the real shift begins not with a bold decision, but with a small, honest movement. Sharing one thought without editing. Trying one idea without protecting the outcome. And letting one part of yourself step forward without asking if it will be welcomed. Because the version of you that has been waiting in the shadows does not need to be extraordinary. It just needs to exist. And perhaps the question that lingers now is this: which part of yourself have you been protecting for so long that it has quietly forgotten what it feels like to live in the open? Aquarius, there is a fear that feels more intimate than failure. It does not scream, it whispers. It asks a question you rarely let yourself finish. If I finally live as who I really am, will I still be wanted in the same way? Not admired, not respected, loved. This is the fear that grows in adulthood. Not about losing status, not about making mistakes, but about losing belonging, because by now, you know how to function. You know how to be pleasant. You know how to be interesting without being disruptive, deep without being too intense, different without being too much. You learned how to become the version of yourself that fits easily into rooms, not fake, just edited. And the world responded well to that version. People trusted you, relied on you, felt comfortable around you. So, you stayed. Not because it felt fully right, but because it felt safe. This is the quiet trap of maturity. You are not living wrong, you are living the most acceptable version of yourself. The one that does not challenge expectations, the one that keeps relationships stable, the one that avoids uncomfortable questions. And yet, something inside you feels slightly unseen, not ignored, just not fully recognized. Like being loved for a photograph instead of the living person. You start to notice it in small moments, when you hold back a thought that feels too real, when you laugh at something that does not actually resonate, when you soften your truth so others do not feel unsettled, not because you want to deceive, but because you want to remain included. And here's the strange part: the more authentic you become internally, the more fragile your sense of belonging feels externally, because your nervous system already knows you are changing. You are shedding layers that once kept you connected, and even if those layers were not lies, they were not the whole truth. So your body asks the question your mind avoids. What happens to love when I stop being convenient? What happens to intimacy when I stop being predictable? What happens to connection when I stop managing how I am perceived? This fear is not about ego. It is about attachment, about the parts of you that learned early that being accepted meant being adjusted, being loved meant being adaptable, being safe meant being understandable. So you became skilled at being digestible. But the real self inside you is not designed to be digestible. It is complex, contradictory, sometimes intense, sometimes quiet, sometimes evolving faster than the people around you. And this is where the tension lives. You do not want to abandon the life you built. You just want to stop abandoning yourself inside it. You are not afraid of being seen. You are afraid of being seen and losing. Losing roles, losing comfort, losing the familiar ways people relate to you. But here is a truth that unfolds slowly with age. The connections that only survive your silence were never connected to your full presence. They were connected to your availability, your agreeableness, your emotional flexibility, not your essence. And real intimacy does not come from being easy to love. It comes from being real enough to be known. Not everyone will stay, that is true. But the ones who remain will finally be meeting you, not a version of you, not a performance, you. Let me ask you something quietly. If someone loved you less for being honest, was that love ever meant to hold your future? Because the self that is emerging in you now does not want admiration. It wants alignment. It wants to exist without shrinking, to speak without translation, to be present without rehearsing. And maybe the real fear is not being seen. Maybe it is this. What if you discover that the love you were protecting was never meant for the person you are becoming? Aquarius. Something begins to change the moment you stop explaining yourself. Not in dramatic ways, not with speeches or ultimatums. Just in the way your breath feels steadier when you finally allow a quiet no to exist. You notice it first in your body, in how your shoulders drop when you do not agree too quickly, in how your chest feels lighter when you say, I need time, I need space, I need this to be different, not as a demand, as a truth. For most of your life, you learned how to stay open, how to be available, how to stretch yourself emotionally so others would feel comfortable around you. You became flexible, understanding, easy to adapt, and people loved you for that. They felt safe with you, they felt supported, they felt seen. But slowly, quietly, you started disappearing inside your own generosity. You gave clarity without receiving it. You offered patience without being met with presence. You held space for everyone else while leaving yourself unheld. So, when you begin to set boundaries, it feels unfamiliar, almost unnatural. Your voice feels different, not harder, just clearer. You are not trying to control anyone. You are simply refusing to abandon yourself. And this is where the real healing begins, not in fixing relationships, but in choosing yourself inside them. Boundaries are not walls, they are thresholds. They mark the point where your energy stops leaking into expectations and starts returning to intention. You do not become colder, you become more honest. You do not become distant, you become more present. Because now, when you say yes, it is not from habit, it is from alignment. And when you say no, yes, it is not rejection, it is self-respect. The right people do not feel threatened by this. They feel invited into something more real. They no longer meet a version of you designed to accommodate. They meet a self that exists, and some connections will shift, not collapse, just reveal their structure. The ones that relied on your silence will feel uncomfortable. The ones that depended on your emotional labor will resist, not because you changed, but because they never learned how to meet you without you shrinking first. This is the quiet rebirth, not becoming louder, becoming clearer, not demanding more, allowing less of what drains you. You start protecting your time, your emotional bandwidth, your inner world, not from bitterness, from awareness. You realize that peace is not something you maintain by managing everyone else. It is something you experience when you stop managing yourself. Let me ask you something gently. Who are you without the role of being the one who understands? Not the mediator, not the listener, not the emotional translator, just you. Because boundaries are not about pushing people away. They are about creating space for your real presence. And here is the paradox. The more you honor your limits, the more alive your relationships become. Because now, they are not built on sacrifice. They are built on choice, not obligation, but mutual clarity. Not fear of loss, but willingness to be known. Some people will step closer, some will step back. Both are information. You are not losing connection. You are filtering it, removing the need to perform, removing the pressure to remain convenient, removing the old contract that said your comfort is secondary to harmony. This is not selfish. It is evolutionary. Your nervous system is learning a new language, one where safety comes from authenticity, not from approval. And the more you practice it, the more something settles inside you. Not confidence, not certainty. Just a deeper sense of being at home in yourself. Because boundaries are not the end of love. They are the beginning of a love that does not require your disappearance to survive. And perhaps the most important question now is this. What parts of your life would finally feel alive if you stopped giving them access to a version of you that no longer exists? Aquarius. At some point, the noise inside you becomes quiet. Not because everything is solved, not because life suddenly makes perfect sense, but because something finally settles. A soft kind of clarity. The kind that does not rush. The kind that does not need to announce itself. You begin to notice it in small ways, in how you wake up without immediately feeling behind, in how your thoughts feel less crowded, in how you no longer search for signs everywhere, because something inside already feels aligned. Nothing dramatic happened, no big revelation, no life-changing moment anyone would notice. Just a subtle shift, a deeper breath, a slower pace, a feeling that you are no longer fighting yourself. This is the seed moment. It does not feel like transformation. It feels like permission to move differently, to respond instead of react, to choose what feels honest over what feels impressive. You stop waiting for certainty. You stop waiting for validation. You stop waiting for a future version of yourself to arrive and save you. Instead, you start listening to the way your body reacts to decisions, to the quiet excitement that appears when something feels true, to the gentle discomfort that shows you where growth wants to happen. You do not need to know the whole path. You only need to recognize the direction. And for the first time in a long while, you trust that recognition, not blindly, but calmly. You make a small choice. One no that protects your energy. One yes that feels aligned with your values. One habit that brings you closer to yourself instead of further away. No one applauds, no one notices, no one calls it brave. Yeah, but something in your nervous system relaxes because you are no longer living on autopilot. You are participating in your own becoming. This is what real change feels like. Not fireworks, not reinvention, just a quiet consistency with your inner truth. You stop forcing yourself into timelines that no longer resonate. You stop measuring progress by comparison. You stop waiting for your life to look different before you allow it to feel different. And slowly, without effort, you become someone new. Not in personality, in presence. You speak with less tension. You listen with more depth. You choose with more awareness. You begin to live from the inside out. The seed moment is invisible. No one documents it. No one celebrates it. It happens while washing dishes, while driving home, while sitting in silence after a long day. It is the moment you decide to treat your inner voice as real, not as imagination, not as overthinking, but as guidance. And from that moment on, your future is quietly altered, not by fate, not by luck, by a series of small, honest alignments that only you will ever fully understand. Let me ask you one last thing. If no one ever knew about your growth, if there were no witnesses, no recognition, no reward, would you still choose to live this way? More present, more truthful, more connected to yourself. Because that is the real question beneath all of it. Not who you will become, but whether you are finally willing to stay with who you are becoming. The seed does not rush the tree. It simply grows in its own rhythm toward the light it trusts. And maybe your life is not asking you to change everything. Maybe it is only asking you to keep choosing yourself, quietly, until one day you realize you never needed to become someone else. You just needed to stop leaving yourself behind. Aquarius, before you go back into the world, just pause here for a moment. Not to remember what you heard, but to notice what shifted, because something did. Maybe not in your thoughts, but in your body, in your breathing, in the way your chest feels a little softer than before. That is not imagination. That is resonance. You did not come here to be entertained. You came here because some part of you was ready to hear the truth in a quieter language, and you listened. Not with your ears, with your nervous system, with the version of you that no longer wants noise, no longer wants to perform growth, no longer wants to chase signs in the sky, and only to feel grounded in your own orbit again. This is what makes Aquarius different. You do not need to be told what to become. You only need to be reminded of what you already are when you are not trying to escape yourself. Independent, sensitive, visionary, but finally, present. If this message found you at the exact moment you needed it, leave a small sign in the comments. Just one word that describes how you feel right now. Not for me, for you. So, your future self can one day scroll back and remember this was the moment something real began. And if this space feels safe to you, if this voice feels like a mirror instead of advice, stay connected. Subscribe, not to a channel, but to a frequency. A place where you do not have to pretend to be evolving. You simply are. The next message is already forming, not louder. Oh, not more dramatic. Just deeper, more precise, closer to who you are becoming. Until then, Aquarius, trust the quiet choices you are making. Trust the version of you that feels calm instead of urgent. Trust the seed that is growing even when no one sees it. Because the universe is not asking you to prove anything. It is only asking you to stay aligned with the life that is gently, patiently unfolding through you.